Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we will be talking about two very important stories. The first is with reference to Youm-e-Shuhada Kashmir or Kashmir Day that is being observed in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir and all across the world today in remembrance of the 22 Muslims who had sacrificed their lives in Kashmir in protests against the charges that were placed on a Kashmiri leader, Abdul Qadir. And of course, this is something that had happened back in 1931 on 13th of July by the Dogra forces, but this is something that is also a symbol of what has happened in the many years and decades since then as well. So many youth and so many Kashmiris have continued to sacrifice their lives, not just on this day, but every single day since then and long before that as well. We know that there have been continued sacrifices by the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and we're just going to be remembering not just those 22 Muslims who sacrificed their lives today on 13 July 1931, but of course the people of Kashmir in general as well, and how their resolve continues still to fight for their just struggle to the right of self-determination against the Indian occupation forces, and how the world still continues to turn a blind eye and hasn't really done something about it to relieve the people of their suffering. Pakistan, of course, has always stood in solidarity with the people of Kashmir and has always extended moral, diplomatic and political support to the Kashmir cause. We've, of course, also highlighted this issue at various fora and different platforms as well, and also extend our support in observance of the Youm-e-Shuhada Kashmir today as well. So we're going to be taking a look at that, remembering the incident, of course, that is marked today, and then, of course, the struggle in general and what needs to be done about it. Our second segment is going to focus on the Punjab by-polls that are going to be held on 20 vacant seats on the 17th of July. There have been different campaigns that have been going on by different political parties in the preparation for these by-polls as well. We also know that there have been claims by the PTI of pre-poll rigging being taking place. They've also filed a petition to the ECP with regards to this, and of course other PMLN candidates as well. We also know that, of course, these by-polls in general are going to be important in terms of how they're going to determine the future scenario of Punjab, and then, of course, the general elections as well, and how the parties will do in that. So we'll be taking a look at all of that, and then, of course, the way that this is going to turn out and how certain polling stations are going to be sensitive, what sort of security measures are going to be taking place, and how the ECB is going to ensure free and fair elections, and the impact that that is going to have in the Punjab Assembly and, of course, in the political scenario of the country. So these are our two segments of the show today. For this and more, of course, we've been joined in the studios by Farrukh Pitafi and Raja Faisal, as always. And for our first segment with regards to the Kashmir Day, we're going to be also joined online by respected guests. We've been joined by Dr. Jamil Khan, who's a former ambassador, and we've also been joined by Mr. Altaf Hussain Wani, who's a senior leader of the APHC. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us on the show today. I'll start with you, Mr. Altaf Wani. When we look at the scenario in Kashmir today, we have unfortunately seen so many instances taking place that are similar to what has happened in 1931 in terms of the amount and the scale of sacrifice that has continued since then, and even before that as well. We've seen that this has been something that is going on for a long time in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. But let's start off first with also remembering those 22 Muslims who sacrificed their lives on the 13th of July 1931 today. What do you have to say about them?
Yeah, actually, 13 July 1931 marks a very historic and a critical day in the history of Kashmir. At that time, there was an autocratic rule of Maharaja of Kashmir, and against that, people of Kashmir, and because of the four incidents that took place earlier before the 13th of July. At first, it was the khutbah of Eid was stopped in Jammu, and thereafter there were incidents of desecration of Quran at different places in Jammu and as well as in Kashmir. And that led to the agitation in Kashmir, and then people gathered at Khanka Mall, Srinagar, and there a man, namely Qadir, he came out and he spoke to the gathering and asked them to raise the building of the Maharaja's palace, and he was charged with sedition, and then his trial was held in the court, and 22 people were martyred over there while reciting the azan at the time of Zohar prayers. So that day, that struggle at that time was for the cause of for political rights, for civic rights, for social rights, for religious rights, which were snatched by the then the autocratic rule of Maharaja of Kashmir. But slowly, gradually, that moment, then a political party was framed in Kashmir, then Galaxy Commission was formed. Slowly and gradually, people of Kashmir got some of the political rights as well as there's some other social rights as well as education rights and job security. And that, in a way, that agitation was prime education for the enlightenment of the Kashmiri Muslims. And that then we saw after 1947, at that time, the people of Kashmir on 19th of July 1st in 1947, people of Kashmir then decided to have their alignment with political alignment with Pakistan. They decided to join Pakistan, but unfortunately, the government of India, the Congress, they hatched a conspiracy and they led their force in Kashmir. Then people of Kashmir had to start a struggle against that, and that struggle is still continuing. Despite millions of Kashmiris have given their sacrifices till then. After 1989,
Right.
when people started Andifada in Kashmir. Now, coming to the current situation, when we see in Kashmir, now again we are facing the same situation, which was during the autocratic rule of Maharaja. Our political rights, our civil rights, and all of our religious rights have been snatched, and our identity is at stake at that.
Absolutely, Ambassador Jameel. When we look at what had happened back on this day back in 1931, and of course the kind of sacrifice that took place, there are of course numerous other examples also of similar sacrifices in Kashmir. But the kind of resolve that's required for the people of Kashmir and the youth to actually also make such a huge sacrifice. The azan, of course, was completed by these 22 Muslim youth as well, and then we also saw other instances in Kashmir, as Tawani Sahab was pointing out later, after the Indian occupation forces have taken over, and how so many sacrifices keep on happening every single day. Is this sort of resolve seen elsewhere as well? Is this something that is unprecedented or different? Because of course there's been something going on for decades without really any major hope in sight, and still the determination of the people of Kashmir continues.
Well, that has made the history in the mankind. Never ever this kind of a resolve and this kind of a struggle has ever been seen. I have been a part of United Nations, and I was present at the time of independence of East Timor, 25 years of that struggle, and I had my personal interaction of the freedom fighter Shanana Gozmao in East Timor as a representative of the United Nations. And even what stories he has been narrating, that is no parallel to the struggle of Kashmiris. And this history, unfortunately, the kind of struggle, which is very legitimate struggle under the General Assembly Resolution 2649, and there are several more Security Council resolutions which has not been implemented. So this struggle has a full legitimacy, and despite that, the world is not really paying that much of heed, and I will describe you why it's happening. But right now, we all, anyone having a human heart in him or in her, would definitely feel the kind of sacrifices which is being made by the Kashmiris, the kind of resolve which they are showing, the kind of homegrown struggle which is not. Why it has not been, taken that kind of a notice? Although I would say it was recognized and the notice was taken at the highest level, which is the Human Rights Commissioner's report. There are two Human Rights Commissioner reports, and it contains all the atrocities, whether it's a killing of 100,000 Kashmiri struggle fighter, or it's whether it was the custodial killing of over 10,000 people, civilians, those who have been arrested, again, hundreds and thousands of civilians, women, widows, more than 40,000, children orphaned. That's about 200,000. So where in the world we find, despite all this, and now
Right.
Kashmir today is a prison. If, despite this being hostage of
Right,
900,000
absolutely, absolutely, Ambassador,
security
and
forces.
that's of course really important, and it's really pertinent for the world to also understand how huge the sacrifices have been and how long they have continued for. But Farrukh, when we look at the situation currently in Indian illegally occupied Kashmir, then we look back at what happened today in 1931 and how we're observing the Youm-e-Shuhada Kashmir Day today. Unfortunately, that also seems to be something that needs to be observed perhaps every day because that continues to happen. And 1931 seems like a long time back. I understand that it's important for us to observe these days, but what sort of a significance or impact do these days hold in terms of bringing a change in the lives of the people?
Right, Sana, if we were to actually, observe every somber moment of atrocity that has been unleashed by the Indian forces in Kashmir, then I am afraid instead of observing days, you would be observing minutes,
Right.
And that would continue all over throughout the year. But it has been 91 years, 9 years short of a century since this tragedy actually took place, this atrocity took place. And since then, remember that those 22 young men who were killed only, their only crime was that they were actually offering a call to prayer, right? An azan. And they bravely actually continued the azan until the time, they completed it. 22 people had been killed. But despite that, Indian government has unleashed this kind of tragedy. And I keep on asking my Western friends and everybody who will listen, imagine a child who is seeing his father being killed at a spot with a realization that his father also saw someone, his own father, being killed there, and his father was also killed there, right? This is that kind of tragedy that keeps on unfolding, and it is our responsibility to educate the people of the world about what the so-called largest democracy in the world is doing in Kashmir. So at this moment, this idea that there isn't any reaction, the fact that not many countries have actually spoken explicitly against what happened in 2019, or for that matter, whatever has been happening for quite some time, I think we don't have the luxury of relenting or stopping. We have to keep on shouting atop our voices and actually drawing attention to what India is doing in Kashmir. Let us hope in coming days, through this sacrifice, we see that finally Kashmiri brothers and sisters get what they were promised in 1947.
Absolutely.
1948.
Absolutely, that is the hope indeed. Faisal, when we look at the situation today, of course, the Kashmiri struggle also continues, and it has also evolved over the years as well. Since so many decades, of course, have passed, there have been so many ways that people have stood up, and all sorts of people have come out in the streets and protested for their due rights. And of course, Pakistan has also advocated the cause. But in general, when we look at the Kashmiri struggle and how it has progressed over the years, do you see that there have been some gains?
Sana, if we look at the resistance movement of Kashmiris before 1947, their resistance movement was against the Dogras, and then only the actors changed, and of course the Indian brutalities started on Kashmir. And if we check the Kashmiris, the resistance movement of Kashmiris, they have been politically going about it, and of course they wanted a political solution to it. They did not go towards the arms or anything like that. But obviously, if we talk about Intifada, as Altaf Wani Saab, he has mentioned earlier as well, 1990 is the time when they had enough of it, and of course they took up the arms, and they thought that we should go towards this resistance with the arms, so that we can tell the world that we had enough of our political voices being going waste. Now we will show the world that we really want the freedom from Indian brutalities. Of course, we can say that the world kept on considering India as a secular state in past, and they believed in political solutions to it, and they kept on warning Pakistan as well, and warning any of the countries that were pro-Kashmiris in the Middle East countries as well. But now the situation is different. Intifada in 1990, then 1998, then if we talk about 2006, and then 2008, and then time comes when Modi took the office in 2014. After that, we saw a new wave coming into India, that was of 2016. But all of that was different, because whatever we kept on hearing from the Western world, it was that India is a secular state. But right now, it's a different India. It's a different India ruled by the fascist regime of BJP, backed by RSS, and we know on ground there is a hatred against the Muslims especially, and overall all of the minorities. In 2019, August 2019, whatever India did and Modi regime did in Kashmir, the abrogation of 370 and 35A, it is not only against the humanity, but of course it is against the resolution 47, which was passed in the UN, and of course it had the essence of how to resolve the Kashmir conflict.
Right.
But now, when India has even gone against that resolution, then there is no point of knocking about this fact that India is a secular country. India is not a secular country.
Nor a democracy.
Nor a democracy. And to me, if today any of the country even wants to help out the armed struggle of Kashmiris, they must do it, because it's a fascist regime that Kashmiris are fighting against.
Okay.
One creative
Yes.
comment, constructive comment regarding our use of terminology. We keep on calling the regime in India as fascist, right? The problem is if you look at the scope and the intensity of the brute force that they are using in Kashmir or within India, I think that puts all fascists of the 20th century to shame. I think with this kind of fanaticism, you have to come up with a new terminology, and I'm going to call it Modiism.
Right. Altaf Wani, when we look at the situation and of course the freedom struggle, and as Faisal was pointing out, the armed freedom struggle as well, do you think that the world sort of understands the distinction between what is happening in Kashmir as a freedom struggle, or are we still battling with the way the perspective is given or the narrative is shared by the Indian occupation forces?
You see, I think world at large, I think not the political governments, but the world at large, the international human rights organizations, the think tanks and others who monitor Kashmir, who write on Kashmir, they do understand what's happening in Kashmir, what the people of Kashmir are facing. They have written on it a lot. But unfortunately, we don't see the condemnation of the Indian acts from the political governments around the globe. Now, you see, as we are seeing India's brutalities in Kashmir, the way they did the actions on August 5th, 2019, the way they snatched all the rights of the people of Kashmir, they are changing the demography of Kashmir. They have done the limitation of the assembly segments, and then now holding the elections, bringing up an Hindu chief minister and all that. And in this, they are now trying to have the G20 summit in Kashmir. This is very alarming for all of us, for Pakistan, for people of Kashmir. If, God forbid, such a summit happens in Kashmir, then the world, they have to think, the G20 have to think, those powers, the P5, who are responsible for the peace and security, who have passed the resolutions on Kashmir, they are responsible for all these violations which are happening in Kashmir. They are becoming the partners in crime. Similarly, some of the OIC countries they are becoming the partners in crime. They are diverting from their original stand on Kashmir. And also the European Union, which is always propagating the human rights, how they can be a part of this G20 being held in an occupied territory, which is against the international laws. how they can be part of that. But it's again, India has played this gimmick. How it goes, this is a very serious situation for us. And in Kashmir, you see people, despite all odds, whatever the difficulties they have, they can't speak. They are being charged with sedition. If they write anything on social media, they are being charged on sedition and all that. But even after that, the people in Kashmir, they are resisting against the occupation. They try to break the shackles of this slavery which has been imposed by the Indian, what my friend Pitafi said, Modiism has imposed on Kashmir.
Right, absolutely. Ambassador Jameel, when we look at what is going on, and especially what has happened in 2019, it has been 3 years since that, and there have been so many other violations as well. But if we just talk about this one and how it's against the international norms and, of course, the Security Council, UN Security Council resolutions, then, of course, we understand that there was something, a rule, a law in place that was broken. However, instead of that violation having any sort of consequence, it seems that we have, and the world has in general, accepted the new way of things and the new way of life since 2019. Is there ever a possibility, you think, of this going back or in reversal, or do you see that happening anytime soon or maybe later on in the future? I mean, 3 years have passed. How many more do you think will pass before something changes?
Well, India has worked on it for about 15 years, and we know what was the Indian Chronicle, where they had 750 websites, and they were trying to propagate about the legitimacy of illegal acts, what they've been doing in occupied Kashmir, even prior to 5th of August and 2019. But 5th of August 2019 is an eye-opener, and we have to ask questions to ourselves, the world as a whole, and the human rights proponents and activists. They have to ask questions themselves, and they have to keep all those reports which the human rights organizations have been writing, including what I was referring to, the two major reports of the Human Rights Commission, which the commissioner had presented to the press with the tears rolling down their cheeks. So if we have those in our mind, we can very conveniently make out as to how India has been trying to neutralize. Now, your question that has the world accepted it? No, because of this propaganda, because of Indian strategic alliance with US and its allies, there are political interest and the strategic interest in India besides the trade interest. Now, because of which people, I would not say they cannot accept under if they are a UN member, United Nations member, they cannot accept what is going on. They can keep quiet on it for their own political and the interest, economic interest, but they cannot openly accept it.
But isn't that the same thing? What difference does it make if you're quiet on it? Doesn't that amount to acceptance? In effect?
It makes a big difference, Anna. It makes a big difference.
Okay.
Now, basically, what way? Because the struggle, the movement is alive, and this movement, so long as it is alive, the struggle, so long as it's homegrown and continues, one day there would be a realization. Now, the Kashmiris, if they have not really given up the hopes, the world who are siding with the Kashmiris, the members of the United Nations, those who are at least having the sympathies and have given statements in favor of the Kashmiris and their atrocities, against the atrocities, what is going on. So those are the countries and those are the people. Give me one name of any human rights organization, Mr. Wani is here, who has ever favored what all the atrocities which has been unleashed on the Kashmiri people. Not a single.
Right. I understand that. Farrukh, you wanted to add something, but also please also comment on the fact that whether or not when we talk about human rights organizations or other bodies not really doing much, but not really condemning or accepting what's happening, isn't that going to, in effect, not really help the situation?
There are tools available. We should use those tools.
Okay.
Right.
Sure.
Right, Ambassador sir. But Sana, regarding the human rights and everything, earlier I said something that might have intrigued you regarding fascism and what it did in the previous century, right? You know, what is the difference between Hitlerism and Modiism? Hitlerism is doing a crime so vile and doing it so crudely that people wake up to it and they still take action. And that's why we know Hitler as a failed villain of the history, right? Modiism is, on the other hand, is doing the vile thing so effectively and through diplomacy and using the might of an empire like India and doing it so effectively that the entire world stays silent. And this is what is happening at this moment. So I will take anybody who is ready to talk for Kashmiris, right? I will be very happy if human rights organizations actually talk about it. Even if you are an outlier in your country and you are one of the few who talks about anything, if you are going to talk about Kashmir, you are going to be my hero. At this moment, it is important to wake up the world to the atrocities in Kashmir and to the atrocities in broader India. Because at this moment, take 1.3 billion people, right? Just look at the intensity or enormity of the problem. 1.3 billion people, and then drop 300 million hapless minorities in the middle. Then charge all these 1.3 billion people against them, and then stifle them, efface them, and destroy their lives.
Right.
This is what is happening right now in India and especially in Kashmir. So we have to wake up to it, and we have to ask everybody to take a stand.
Yes,
Yeah,
Faisal.
Altaf Wani Saab, but you know, earlier you mentioned about G20 summit, obviously India trying to bring all of the big countries, the mightiest countries of the world to Kashmir and try to legitimize their, actions of the acts of abrogation of 370 and 35A. I just wanted to ask you, of course, you are in touch with the Kashmir movement activists sitting in the West, sitting in the, mightiest capitals of the world. Just wanted to know, is there a sort of a mechanism through which you and your movement people, they can, insist them countries being in their capitals, protesting against, that country, agreeing to go to Kashmir for G20? Is there a mechanism, or can we see in coming days such kind of protests in the West?
Yeah, surely Kashmiris all over the world, wherever there is diaspora, Kashmiri diaspora, along with the Pakistani diaspora, they have devised a mechanism to that. They will protest in those countries. They will meet the parliamentarians. They will meet the policy makers who are there on this subject. All parts of youth conference and my institute has already generated letters to all the G20 countries and to their ambassadors here in Pakistan and elsewhere to sensitize them about the situation in Kashmir and how this is going to be a double standard on the part of these countries, how they are violating their own promises on Kashmir and the promises they have made to the world through the international human rights mechanisms. So Kashmiris in Brussels, in London, in United Kingdom, and all other places will surely protest and surely will create awareness programs to this end in those capitals and meet all the policymakers and all stakeholders in those countries.
Yeah,
Right.
Dr. Jamil, very last one. We saw in Darfur, we saw in East Timor, of course, their resistance was armed resistance as well. America and the Western powers straight away took their sides, and eventually they got freedom, and we agree with that. It was the best thing happened to Darfur and East Timor. Now we talk about Kashmir. Of course, we know it is the most militarized zone of the world. And of course, we know that every day we're getting news from Kashmir coming out that atrocities are being committed against the local population, the Kashmiris. Why it is a taboo to join or to speak in favor of the armed freedom struggle of the Kashmiris? Has it something to do with the Western economic endeavors when it comes to US-China economic war, sir?
And also, Jameel Sahib, if you could add to that, previously you were talking about how
Well,
there are tools that exist to deal with this. What tools may those be, and whether or not they've been utilized, and why not?
You
yeah,
see,
obviously those have not been utilized properly. But let me first answer the question of Faisal.
Sure.
Basically, the Darfur and the East Timor, I would say that was at a smaller scale level, but that was a freedom fighting. Particularly East Timor, where I have served the United Nations and where I have really studied and I've been interacted with those freedom fighters. And in fact, once I was sitting with Sanana Gosma, who later on became the president. He said, well, why people of the world, they don't call Kashmiris as a freedom fighter? I know what is the value of a freedom fighter. So that's what kind of a conversation. And I told the accredited ambassador at that time. But anyways, let me come back on this point that East Timor Ramos Horta, the one who became the prime minister after the independence and later on president, Ramos Horta, Dr. Ramos Horta, and Nobel Prize holder. He was a leading factor along with a complete group of people who was really advocating the cause of East Timor. And I would say it was such a structured, and he used all the available tools of the United Nations in that, besides the political outreach through the means available to him. And he succeeded, as a matter of fact. And I have had the privilege of having first-hand information and conversation with our special envoy, who has been ambassador for quite some time. So he himself said that the way they had really advocated. Now, does it mean that we have not really, now your question, Sana, that does it mean that we have not really used all the tools which are available in the international law, which are available in the international diplomatic and political arena? My question is that we are short of it. We have not. Now, what is happening around is that even for the Kashmir Day, what happens is that we issue a circular, half a page of a A4 size paper, and then we, in various pockets of the embassies, we just celebrate, and after that, we just wait for the next year for it. In fact, Kashmir, what is happening, the human rights violations in Kashmir, and which we are not talking, which has been documented by various organizations, including
Right.
Human Rights Commission. And those documents, number one, the tools should be applied to really make those documents as a base and those Security Council resolutions as a base to really do the advocacy. One. Second,
Right.
armed struggle. A question was asked, armed struggle. Armed struggle is given in the debates, a debate of 2649 General Assembly, that if for freedom fighter, if they need to resolve on the armed struggle, the world should favor them and help them out.
All right.
These
Thank
are
you
the
very much, Ambassador
documented.
Jameel, for joining us, and Mr. Altaf Senwani for being with
Thank
us
you
and being
very
a part of the debate and sharing your views, of course, on the 13th of July, Youm-e-Shuhada Kashmir. And of course, this is being observed in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir and in Pakistan and the world over as well. And as always, we continue to extend our support to the people of Kashmir. We're now going to be talking about the Punjab by-polls. Our second segment is going to focus on the political scenario within our country and what has been going on. There are going to be these by-polls that are going to be held on the 17th of July in 20 seats, and we're going to be seeing, of course, different political parties contest for these seats. There have been a lot of campaigns that have been run in the recent days. There's also been allegations by the PTI with regards to pre-poll rigging. But let's take an overall look at the situation currently and how the ECP is going to ensure free and fair polls. Farrukh, when we look at the current situation and the political campaigns that have been going on for a while now, do you see any one political party as a strong contender, or do you see that there are chances of different political parties for different seats as well? Before you answer that, let me also welcome on the phone line Rana Ehsan Afzal, who's a DTP Milan. Thank you for joining us on telephone line. Yes, Farrukh.
Right. But before I actually answer that question, I have to highlight one handicap that we have, and that is critical to actually understanding any elections that are coming, right? And that is the presence of pollsters. We don't have the kind of number game or people or experts who would
Right.
actually crunch numbers and tell you who is likely to win. So in the absence of that, how do you actually understand what is going on? You actually use your sensory perception, and that is the looks and the appearance of their jalsas or their rallies. So at this moment, I must say that both sides have been able to pull up a lot of a humongous crowds, right? And that could mean anything. And your question that whether one party may get all the votes or the other, at this moment it seems that it is PTI's fight to lose, because they can actually manipulate anything. They can say if they lose, they can say that there was dhanli, or there was a rigging, massive rigging, or there was a conspiracy, right? So how do you defeat such a party that refuses to take no for an answer? On the other side, you look at PMLN. PMLN at this moment is in power, so there has to be a little bit of incumbency factor as well. But then there are a couple of things that are quite intriguing. One federal minister and one provincial minister have resigned so that they can go out and campaign for the candidates. That would actually indicate that PMLN is taking some pressure. But I think that there is a problem here. Optics-wise, usually PTI does a lot of good. They bring in a lot of people together in jalsas. But usually, historically, since 1996, they have poor record of transforming that jalsa, that crowd, into votes. So there's a possibility that that might happen this time as well. But let's see what happens.
All right. Let us also welcome in the debate Rana Ehsan Afzal. And of course, you were hearing what Farrukh was talking about earlier. And I'd like to start with the resignation of the two ministers as well, and how and why that took place. Of course, the stance that is coming out is that it is for the election campaign. But why was it necessary for these two ministers to do that? Wasn't the election campaign already surviving well on its own?
Thank you so much for taking my point of view. Well, these were individual decisions, and the party did not instruct, or the Prime Minister or the Chief Minister did not instruct any of those ministers to resign. They just felt that it is a time where they need to be a part of the campaign, and therefore they resigned. According to my knowledge, I think that a party which is building a narrative that the ECP is not neutral, and that there is state machinery is being used to rig the election, seems to be building grounds for their defeat. And all these announcements and apprehensions coming from PTI, them trying to build a narrative rather than providing evidence to ECP on such allegations, which we're not seeing happening. But, so it seems that the PTI is building the grounds for their defeat. We are confident that we will win a majority of number of seats. And we feel it is the narrative, it is the reality that, the 4 years of misgovernance of PTI, the mess that we're trying to clean up, the fact that we've, turned around the economy, which was heading towards the Sri Lanka-like disaster. We still have big challenges. There's inflation, there's a super commodity cycle happening all over the world. So, but apart from that, we feel that the people of Pakistan are intelligent enough to realize that we have the decisions we have made for the betterment of Pakistan, and we will be taking the economy.
I have a question for you. I'm glad that you actually mentioned the super cycle that is affecting the entire world. And you must have also seen the Prime Minister's tweet regarding the petroleum prices. At this moment, our understanding is that the agreement or the deal with the IMF is still to be sealed. So it will take a couple of weeks more to actually finalize. At that time, deciding to bring down the petroleum prices, is it not dangerous for the economy? And do you see that your detractors might see it in connection with the election in Punjab, sir?
Firstly, I think that the reason, the target to collect the petroleum levy, we know that it is a high target. It is around 700 billion, and the plan is to increase the levy over a period of time. But as you know, that the prices are linked with the international prices, and there has been a drop in the international prices. Hence, there is a little bit of space to give relief to the people of Pakistan, and that was the background of where the Prime Minister thinks that this relief is well deserved for the people of Pakistan. But even if we would have kept them at the same level, I would have supported that decision. But the Prime Minister feels the people need relief in these tough times, and hence it was decided that as the space is available because of the fall in the crude oil prices, so hence this relief is coming.
Yeah, Rana
All
Saab,
right.
Rana Saab, as a student of politics, of course, I've always talked about democracy and advocated democracy, and of course
Today he is not, right?
For democracy, elections and by-elections, they are sort of a food for democracy. Looking at the current situation, of by-elections, of course, there are 2-3 concerns which I want to share, and I want
Sure.
your say as well on that. Number one, of course, the security situation in coming days, because it is expected that the by-election would be a very heated by-election, because it is going to decide the fate of the coming days. So the security, and the second one, the process by the election commission, of course, and you were right pointing out that PTI has already started talking about it, that the state is sort of ECP is taking sides. So what would be your stance, your party's stance later on after the elections, because it is evident that if PTI loses, there will be slogans regarding that as well. The third one, I wanted to ask about. Usually, we see that in every election, especially the by-elections, PMLN is very good at getting joining hands from other parties as well. As the reports are coming from Jung, that one of the religious political party, it has joined PMLN. Are there any more joiners? Can you please enlighten us on that? Out of 20 seats, where would be more joiners?
I think we have a majority in 16 seats, and we should be winning them. And the coalition is there. People's Party is supporting us in these by-elections in Punjab, and we have support from other political parties as well. So definitely there is an advantage over there. And your first question, that we are following the code of conduct of the election commission, and whatever they are asking from the government, we are fulfilling them. We are lending them that support to make sure that the security, whatever ECP has required, we will provide them on the election day. And Hamza Saab has already assured the Supreme Court that there will be no use of state machinery for any advantage of PMLN. So rest assured, everyone is watching these by-elections, and we will make sure that they are peaceful, and the elections are in the hands of the ECP. And whatever support they want, whatever demands they have, the government is going to fulfill them. And no one can shut anyone's mouth on what they want to, what narrative they want to build. But sadly, this has been a tradition of Pakistan, that whatever party loses, it blames the winning party, that there was rigging. But we will ensure that no such thing happens from our side.
All right. Rana Saab, can you also let us know whether or not there is a way of convincingly carrying out the elections in such a way that perhaps if any objections are even raised, however baseless, they can be argued against, and there can be evidence provided against that when we talk about free and fair elections and that we're confident that they happen, we can actually also back that with evidence. And secondly, there are, of course, news and reports coming in with regards to factions within the PMLN as well, and then, of course, whether or not the coalition is as strong as is being portrayed. Can you also comment on that, and whether or not there are factions within the PMLN existing on various decisions?
Well, I think, the Election Commission is an independent institute, and it is a neutral institute, and the head of the Election Commission was appointed by the PTI government. And I think, they are fully empowered to act on any evidence provided about rigging, and they have all remedies available. The law is there, and the PTI has been part of that system. So they have been talking good about this election commission when it suited them, and now they're talking bad about it when it doesn't suit them, or when they feel that they're on the losing end. So I think ECP is the forum of remedy. They can provide all and every remedy to any complaints or any proof or evidence that PTI may provide to the election commission. We have nothing to do with that.
Rana Sahab, would it be a very good exercise for the next year's general elections?
Yes, I think this election on 20 seats is one of the biggest by-elections ever. So in a way, this is an exercise for the general elections. But let's hope that they are peaceful, and let's hope that each party accepts the results, whatever they may be. PMLN should accept where they lose the elections, and PTI should accept where they lose the elections.
Amazingly, this time most of the candidates who are running are the defectors from the previous government. So they are going to run, or their relatives perhaps. They are going to run. They are going to win. And in the end, when 22nd comes, there will be a lot of pressure for them to decide whether they are going to continue with your party because you are incumbents now, or they are going to go with Chaudhry Parvez Elahi. Do you think that kind of scenario is also possible, and you are actually doing enough that you do not end up campaigning for the enemy's allies?
Pitafi Sahab, we believe in the system, and if we're unable to show majority on the 22nd, then we lose the right to govern Punjab, and we will accept that.
That's a very good answer.
Very good answer.
So we accept that. So whatever the results may be, we are willing to face the consequences, and we hope that the other party will do the same. So
great. Thank you very much, Rana Ahsan Sahab. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. Thank you for your time and for answering the questions as well and being part of the debate. That's all we have from the debate. Of course, we were going to be seeing more about this on the 17th and, of course, prior to that as well. But, of course, as Rana Sahab was already talking about, we hope that the system prevails and everybody respects that as well. And there are finally some free and fair elections in the country. That's all from the debate. See you tomorrow.